We just heard from Donald Trump and his entire cabinet, in addition to talk that the United States is now preparing for a crushing blow against Iran. In this video, we're going to break down everything that has been said and talked about regarding Iran over the last 24 hours so we can catch you up to speed. First, we're going to start with Larry Fink of BlackRock, simply because he says, the problem with this war is there's no middle outcome. There are either two outcomes. Oil's either going way down as we ramp up oil production and the war goes down, or ends, and we get down to, say, $40 a barrel of oil, or we get to $150 or more per barrel of oil. And if we get that, especially over the next months to potentially years, then there will be a, quote, global recession. Not great. So, where does the White House stand on all of this? Well, the White House is talking about a crushing blow, a crushing show of force to Iran. And per Axios, which lately has seemed to be one of the biggest recipients of White House-sided leaks, whereas leaks on other sides, sort of like the Iranian side or anti-White House side, are coming out from different sources, Axios seems to have a pretty good scoop inside the White House lately. In the current talk, this is not what they're making public, but this is from the current talk, and then we'll talk about what they're publicly saying. The current talk is that through a crushing show of force, the United States might invade or blockade Karg Island. Remember, that's the island that controls about 90% of Iranian oil exports. They might invade other islands, so that way they can solidify control of the Strait of Hormuz, even though Donald Trump in public press conferences says, we don't need the Strait, we don't even get any oil out of it, we have enough of our own. Even though he's saying that, I think Donald Trump realizes that what he's doing is downplaying the importance of the Strait to try to quell the rise in oil prices, while at the same time militarily preparing to take control of the Strait. In part, Donald Trump at his press conference with Marco Rubio as well seemed to imply that they would consider a Venezuela-style option where they essentially joint venture with Iran on oil production and exports, and then at the same time take some of the profits. Now, I personally find it unlikely that Iran is going to be interested in something like that, essentially making a deal with Donald Trump, but hopefully a deal like that would be better than ground troops going to war, or the furtherance of these crushing blows. So in addition to invading or blockading Karg Island, they might invade Larak, which is another island with outposts, bunkers, attack craft, small boats, small dive boats that can attach limpet mines to ships, some magnetically attached C4 capsules, basically. You can sort of just drive up or even dive up and clunk onto the side of a cargo ship and blow a hole into it. They might seize other islands as well as ships and essentially just control operations throughout the entire strait. And then they might also conduct operations deep inside of Iran to secure the highly enriched uranium, which Iran is believed to have about 460 kilos of that roughly 60% highly enriched uranium. I suspect that the United States knows exactly where it is. I think there is a very specific reason we have not heard a lot of talk about Pickaxe Mountain either being attacked or showing up in the news, because frankly, I think Pickaxe Mountain is exactly where the highly enriched uranium was tracked to, and the United States wants it and doesn't want to destroy it, though I suppose destroying and burying it is an option. I think they want the certainty that that highly enriched uranium has left Iran. Now, Donald Trump says that he's not going to answer whether or not we're going to put troops on the ground or actually invade deep into Iran, because he wouldn't want to give up his hand, so to speak. But interestingly, in the past few weeks, he's regularly denied his interest in doing that, while quietly we hear leaks that he is interested in doing that. I think the closer Donald Trump gets to actually wanting to do it, the more he says, well, I'm not going to tell you. Because that's exactly what happened with Maduro. For many weeks, it was, no, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to do anything. And then right before the operation, why would I tell you if we're going to do anything? So there seems to be this arc of Trump. Deny. Well, I'm not going to tell you. Boom, do it. Anyway, Carolyn Levitt, of course, says that Donald Trump doesn't bluff and he is ready to unleash hell on Iran if they don't make a deal. Galibaf, who's considered the person that Donald Trump is negotiating with, did just release a press statement and stated that, quote, all enemy movements are under surveillance of our armed forces. If these enemy forces take any action, all of the vital infrastructure in the region, that is all the neighboring countries and otherwise, will be targeted without limitation by relentless attacks. Obviously, the IRGC and Iran are highly skeptical of any kind of deal with Donald Trump. Now, what's interesting is Iran has maintained the capability of launching drone and missile strikes throughout all of this talk about talks or no talks. And part of this could be because Iran is arguing, well, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, obviously, during the fog of war, but Iran is arguing that they have the capacity of manufacturing 400 weapons, drone weapons, kamikaze drones, the Shahed 136s, or the other variants that they have, per day. And, they've used maybe 3,000 so far, but they argue they can manufacture that back in 6 to 7 days. So what's remarkable here is that got me thinking, is it not possible that a lot of that Iranian manufacturing that was moved to Russia could actually create a two-sided flow of weaponry? See, Iran has manufacturing facilities in Russia. It is entirely possible that they suspected the Americans would bomb their manufacturing in Iran, so they've already prepared for this by establishing manufacturing in Russia under the guise of helping Russia against the Ukraine war. But they could also easily, through the Caspian Sea and the rivers that flow into it, end up supplying those same weapons back into the country of Iran itself. Now, safe from the destruction by the Americans, unless, of course, Americans want to directly attack Russia, which seems highly unlikely. Russia, mind you, seems to love rising oil prices and the fact that Donald Trump has waived sanctions against Russian oil purchases, which makes a lot of sense and helps Russia make a whole lot of money. But anyway, there were these rumors that Israel had the coordinates to assassinate Arghachi, the foreign minister of Iran, as well as Galibaf. But Pakistan said if you do that and you assassinate them, there will be nobody left to talk to in Iran. That's because primarily we think that the Speaker of the Parliament, Galibaf, as well as to some extent the foreign minister, are the ones that are involved in negotiations between the United States and Iran through the intermediary Pakistan, given that Iran and the United States are not talking to each other directly. Now, of course, the United States issued a 15-point plan, but this morning, Iran rejected that 15-point plan. Iran says it is one-sided and unfair. Iran wants reparations and ballistic missiles, as well as control of Hormuz, and the United States wants none of that. So as a result, Donald Trump today said that we are unsure about reaching a deal. He says that the Iranians are begging to work out a deal, which we don't know to the extent that that is true. But Donald Trump also says that Iran better get serious soon, quote, before it is too late, because once that happens, there's no turning back and it won't be pretty. This comes obviously as our first amphibious group, the USS Tripoli from Japan, arrives tomorrow. And then, of course, our paratroopers are likely already in the region, given that they can deploy worldwide within 18 hours, and they were deployed 2 days ago. Now, CENTCOM has just announced that they've hit their 10,000th target, and that 92% of Iran's largest vessels in the Navy, as well as the Navy leader per Israel this evening, or last evening, have been destroyed and eliminated. CENTCOM also says that we have air superiority and we're extending our reach deeper into the country. In my opinion, that's really setting the roadmap for that sort of deeper, potentially paratrooper invasion to get that highly enriched uranium, as well as this note about the Navy being crippled at 92% destruction. There's some extra context here that I think they're purposefully not telling you. See, CENTCOM is telling us that 92% of Iran's largest vessels are destroyed. Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and J.D. Vance take this and run with it and go, we destroyed their entire Navy. But that's not the reality, because the reality is the small craft are the ones that we are most worried about. The small boats that look like little fishing vessels, ribs, whether they're hard-shelled or inflatable, the quick-moving small craft, those are the ones that we have to be most concerned about. We also have to be concerned about fiber optic drones. Fiber optic drones, which you could essentially fly first-person, point of view in a cave, if you will, And these drones can be remotely operated, fly out of a cave, basically from a thin fiber optic string that's like a fishing line that essentially electromagnetic interference can't do anything to because it's connected to a cable rather than through some form of radio signal. See, most of the drones we use recreationally, obviously around home, these are all just radio signals. So if somebody jams the radio signal, the drone falls out of the sky. Fiber optic drones prevent that because you're literally tethered for up to 30 miles of this like fishing line that drops down. It's a little messy to clean up after the fact. But the point is, if they have a 30-mile range on these kamikaze drones that can be operated through a fiber optic cable, just like in Russia and Ukraine, and Iran has the manufacturing prowess to put these together, well, what a perfect place to use them as the Strait of Hormuz, which is 30 miles wide. So there's some serious concerns here that the strait could remain closed for a substantially long period of time. Now, Donald Trump did indicate that the present Iran gave was allowing 8 oil ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz under the Pakistani flag. And this was sort of a gesture of good faith that, hey, you're negotiating with the right people and you should make a deal with us. Of course, again, Iran wants reparations, and they say that Donald Trump's 15-point plan is nowhere close to where we need to be. It's worth knowing that we used to have 40 to 50 ships go through the strait on a daily basis containing oil. And now we're down to 8. And it's not just oil, it's also the liquefied natural gas infrastructure that if we ground invade or conduct any kind of operation in Iran, we risk Iran striking more LNG facilities in the region, which would be absolutely devastating to the global gas market. There is no strategic gas reserve like there's a strategic oil reserve you can release. And on top of that, liquefied natural gas takes cooling temperatures of around negative 240 degrees to liquefy a gas, right? And we're going from not from like a solid to a liquid, right? Through heating it up, we're actually literally going from a gas, which takes up a lot of volume, to a more sort of compressed liquid form that we can then transport. But that takes cooling it or freezing it substantially. And so when you break an oil pipeline, you can put a new iron pipe in and replace it and fix it. When you break a liquefied natural gas pipeline, such as the strikes that have occurred in Qatar at Qatar Energy, then what happens is you could potentially set that plant back for 5 years because all those pipelines have to be bespoke manufactured for these temperatures that really have no other purpose, and there are very few supplies of. So there's serious long-term implications here of potentially some form of troop invasion or escalation to this war, which Nancy Mace, who is a Republican in Congress, gives us some commentary on this that doesn't give me a lot of optimism that we are not going to see troops. In other words, I think we are going to see troops on the ground based on just Nancy Mace's comments here alone. I want you to see this. So take a look at this on screen here. Just walked out of a House Armed Services briefing on Iran. Let me repeat, I will not support troops on the ground in Iran. Even more so after this briefing, I will not support sending South Carolina's sons and daughters to war in Iran. I won't do it. We cannot allow the Washington war machine to turn Iran into another Iraq. The Washington war machine is hard at work. They're trying to drag us into Iran to make it another Iraq. We can't let them. These were some comments from a Republican congresswoman here. And to me, it's a sign that the Department of War has presented serious plans to invade Iran. And these are credible enough to where now some of our congressmen and women are beginning to essentially shake in their boots, which isn't great. This is also at the same time as we're still getting bombardment in Israel and, of course, in Tehran. In fact, I am just now seconds ago getting a headline coming through across the newswire services. Explosions heard in Iran's capital, Tehran, and Karaj city. Heavy air defense activity. State media. Anyway, continuing here, we are now in week 4 of this war. The Trump administration has said that this war would last 4 to 6 weeks. So far, Donald Trump makes the argument that we have all the time in the world. There's no rush to end it, which is also not a great comment. And that the Iranians are basically bragging that America has been sucked into a quagmire and that this war could last a whole lot longer than people contend. Iraq cost the United States $2 to $3 trillion, just for comparison with how long it took, and killed 4,500 American troops. Iran is focused on broadening this battlefield out. So not just broadening time, but also attacking and bringing other countries into this war, which is not ideal. And so it really forces Donald Trump into a position of end the war now, or by tacoing, which could potentially harm U.S. credibility and signal that Tehran does control the Strait of Hormuz, or accelerate the war. Problem with this is the Vietnam concern. Now, in Vietnam, we thought we were fighting against a communist ideology and that the people wanted to be freed, but we were actually fighting Vietnamese nationalism. And so the question is, how much nationalism is there in Iran? Are we really freeing people from this, evil Ayatollah dictatorship? These are all questions we might not know until, frankly, hindsight bias strikes. But anyway, the enlistment age in the United States was just raised to 43, which is also quite interesting because it also suggests that, once again, ground forces may become more necessary. And this has led some people to wonder, does this mean the draft age has also been raised? And the presumption there is yes, but the United States has not had a draft in quite a long time. I would guess the last one was World War II, but let's see. Last time United States had a draft was Vietnam War, actually. Wow, think of that. 1972, we had a draft for the Vietnam War, which is very interesting. That makes sense because that's the one Donald Trump had the bone spurs in because he, couldn't go to war with the bone spurs for the doctor I'm pretty sure he was the landlord of. So his tenant wrote him the doctor's note. We'll have to fact check if that indeed was a tenant, but I'm pretty sure it was. But anyway, so now where we stand is, if Donald Trump does end up going with this crushing blow ground war, where we take strategic control of the Hormuz with troops along the coast, strategic islands, and we go in to take the highly enriched uranium out of Iran, it does make us very concerned that this war will escalate substantially prior to relaxing. The OECD has just warned that the global economy could see a major hit in 2026 and, frankly, even worse in 2027, which isn't great because we've got plenty pieces of the economy already slowing down, whether it's the artificial intelligence fundraising that might be slowing down. I mean, we've seen this with OpenAI suggesting that, hey, we now have to offer 17.5% guaranteed yields to private investment funds just to be able to raise money. On top of that, you've got this potential fear that private credit is nowhere near a bowing out. Or being over with, I should say, not bowing out. And the real problems are really just beginning with private credit, especially since now we're seeing the Ares Fund also provide redemption caps and limits, suggesting that investors are rushing to get their money out and can't. Again, coming on top of the OECD warning that the global economy is likely to be downgraded as this war continues, with the United Kingdom and Europe getting downgraded the most, given that, per them, they had the weakest momentum going into this. So now this leaves us with some of the press conference comments that we got from Donald Trump and the team. So let's analyze those a little bit. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance say that the Iranian Navy is effectively destroyed. This is, again, in my opinion, wrong, given that they're ignoring not only the 8% that CENTCOM talked about that has not been destroyed for large vessels, but also the small craft vessels, which were not mentioned as being targeted. You do have Marco Rubio suggesting that the United States has been at war with Iran for 47 years, and this might be a way to end it. This isn't entirely untrue. We have regularly been at war with Iran and their proxies. One of our negotiators, Steve Witkoff, suggests that we want no enrichment, no chance of weaponizing nuclear weapons, decommissioning of Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, and all of the enrichment material turned over to the United States, as well as a cutback in missile and long-range inventory. Unfortunately, Iran's response so far has been that they have the unalienable right to enrich uranium. They have enough highly enriched uranium to make 11 nukes. And unfortunately, following that, that's when we invaded on February 28th, and that currently the United States has presented a 15-point plan through Pakistan, and that right now we sit at an inflection point with no great alternatives. This is not great because it suggests that as the United States continues with its air superiority, we're really just a a go-ahead away from Donald Trump to start sending in actual American soldiers. Pete Hegseth brags about how much air superiority we have, not only CENTCOM saying we're getting deeper, but Pete Hegseth suggesting that the very presence of our A-10 Warthog planes and Apache helicopters suggests the Iranians have very little anti-aircraft power left. Bessent says that the Strait of Hormuz is an economic choke point, and we only had the appearance of security previously, so after we get the guarantee of security, things will get better and prices will come back down. Donald Trump was asked if we're going in for the uranium. And then, of course, this is where Donald Trump, as I alluded to earlier, says, that's a ridiculous question. I wouldn't tell you, which in my opinion implies we're getting close to Donald Trump going in for it. Donald Trump says we're not running out of weaponry. We have munitions around the world, and that maybe we can have a joint venture with Venezuela, but ultimately we do not need the Strait of Hormuz. So, in other words, all of this so far sounds escalatory, in my opinion. None of this is de-escalatory, and it's bad. I think this is exactly why we're seeing the 2-year Treasury move up now to 3.94, almost back to 4, which is what we saw Monday morning when Donald Trump seemed to nearly taco on the 5-day piece. The 10-year is sitting at 4.39 and Brent at 107, with mortgage rates now at 6.38. All quite elevated, with the market today rotating down. I was quite bearish on the market this morning in our Group Alpha report, and even specifically mentioned that SanDisk and Micron had downside ahead of them. And sure enough, SanDisk is now down 9%. Microsoft is down 5%. The Qs, we mentioned this morning, the 577 line was probably where we'd be looking for a bounce, if any, and we've been bleeding right towards that line today. And of course, I was very aggressive talking about the heavy downside likely coming to the VCX Fundrise Fund, and that stock has absolutely cliff dove in, I don't know. It's gone off a cliff since my Alpha report call this morning. The Alpha report was released right at about 6. So that would put it right here where this was trading for about $431. And since that call this morning, the stock is now down over 50% from that pre-market movement, which is pretty remarkable. Anyway, if you want to be a part of that in our fundamental analysis live streams every morning with technical analysis and the Alpha report, make sure you go to meetkevin.com. You get all the courses on building your wealth. You get that lifetime membership access to the Alpha report. And in the meantime, folks, good luck.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.